Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. A big round of welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 2021 UN South Asia Forum on Business and Human Rights. This is the session titled Leave No Worker Behind Towards Due Diligence for Home Workers in Textile and Leather Supply Chains. I am Praveena Shrestha from Q Design, and I will be a technical facilitator for today. Both the chat function and Q&A will be on. So if you have any questions for the speakers, please use the Q&A function. Please note that the session today is recorded. If you have any questions about Zoom or require technical assistance, please feel free to privately message TF Praveena Shrestha for help using the chat box. I will now hand over to Rohan Fries, who is the Business and HR Manager at Tradecraft India. Rohan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Praveena. It's really great to be able to join the summit, join this side session, and draw attention to a particular constituency of workers that is often missed out of perhaps well-intentioned supply chain due diligence efforts, and as a result, do not necessarily receive the benefits that the broader B&HR support systems that are emerging globally and indeed encouragingly so have to offer. We work, the partners that are mentioned here, with support from the European Union. We work with home workers, who are a constituency of workers that is largely female, and work in many parts of India and in other parts of South Asia as well. And home workers are, partly because they are working at home, and in that sense they are less visible, are often among the most vulnerable of female workers, finding themselves being paid perhaps the lowest of all women workers, if not among the lowest, and typically without an employment relationship, which is so important to be able to actually negotiate any kind of good terms, or what we may call decent work, as the ILO, and we're fortunate to have Bharti with us today from the ILO, have developed, and others have also taken forward. So the fortunate thing is, in fact, that although these due diligence systems, whether they're working in apparel or footwear or other types of value chains, although they have not necessarily reached all home workers in India and other parts of South Asia, and indeed sort of more broadly across the world, there are actually tools, processes, approaches that are tried and tested, that are proven to actually make a difference to home workers, and can really support them then to develop voice, agency, access better working conditions, and over time to be able to access the decent work that many of us take for granted, and indeed that is a commitment now that businesses under UNBHR guidelines, under frameworks such as the OECD Due Diligence Guidelines, under other guidelines which are sort of supported by ILO as well in terms of the home worker policy that they have advised states to take up, that this actual ecosystem does exist, and really what we would like to invite collaborators to do is to engage with it and to think about how we can work together to improve conditions for home workers. So at this point, I would like to just introduce our colleague Lakshmi, who has vast experience working in support of women's issues, both in the private sector as well as in the civil society space. And Lakshmi will be taking forward the session from here.
Thanks, Rohan. And are we doing like a full run through, or are we just testing audio? What are we doing? Sorry for joining late, but another call ran over and then I had to rush to get ready. Am I audible?
We're starting now. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. But we haven't started, right? It's not yet 2 o'clock. Yeah.
We've started a little bit early, actually, because everyone we thought we'll start a little bit early. So.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. And the audiences, we have everybody who's supposed to join us already here with us.
We have about, I think we have about 17 people.
Okay. No, I'm just checking, Rohan, because the information said from 2 o'clock to 3:30 the session is. So I was just wondering if there would be others joining us, or should we wait till the time we sent out?
Yeah. We can do. I think because we went on, so I sort of I just thought I'll do an introduction. Maybe you can just start, Lakshmi, and we'll sort of take it forward.
Oh, okay. Because all right. So again, apologies for anybody who's joining us a little late, but like Rohan said, he's given you the background of all of this, and we will move with the session. The first session is really, we're going to get in different voices today, which are going to give us the varied perspectives on the importance of informal workers, particularly women workers and home workers. And as a world which is in the state of various levels of transition, it's important that we pay attention to these large numbers of women who are very often in the most vulnerable parts of the supply chain. So it's great to have this opportunity to bring everybody together and then to get started. So without any further ado, I now call upon Bharti Birla, who's the Chief Technical Advisor, ILO, for South Asia and CO for India. She'll tell us a little bit more about what DWT and CO means and about the varied roles that she plays. Bharti's been a great support for this work and has been very hands-on in terms of both policy, advocacy, as well as on the ground operations for a number of years on these critical issues. So she will be reflecting on how far have we traveled, taking stock of work to create an ecosystem of support for the home workers in South Asia. So over to you, Bharti, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. And just to explain, I think there was a little misunderstanding about the time zone. So that's why we started a little bit early. So that's what happened. So we have a full hour and a half. So we're just, I think it's 1:57 now, India time. So we have a full hour and a half until 3:30 India time.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, so over to you, Bharti.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi, and thanks so much, Rohan. I think you've sort of set the stage for our today's discussion and the larger issue of where are the home workers in the entire discussion on human rights and business. So I'm going to present a few things from the ILO side, and the idea is that these deliberations and our discussions actually come up with an ecosystem which enables decent work for these invisible and hidden workers. What I'm going to talk about today is how far we have traveled and taking a stock of what the situation is currently and how do we really create an enabling ecosystem for home workers in South Asia. I'm very happy that Tradecraft is organizing this session with support of EU, and all the partner organizations are also here. So together, all of us have to work towards it because no one can actually do this alone. I am the project manager for Sustainable Global Supply Chain projects in South Asia. It's an ILO Japan project. And ILO Decent Work team for South Asia caters to South Asia. And also the New Delhi office serves both as decent work team for South Asia office as well as a country office for India, and that's what CO stands for. Before I start talking about home workers, let's take a look at how many home-based workers are there. And then we will discuss why figures for home workers are not really available, which is going to present the real data on home-based workers. So as of 2019, as per the ILO report, there are 260 million home-based workers globally. And this is a substantial number. This forms around 7.9% of the global employment. And if you look at the gender divide, we see that the women have a higher propensity to work from home, around 11.5% women compared to 5.6% men. If we look at different countries and where the home-based workers are spread, this graph sort of tells you the countries where the population of home-based workers is more than 15% compared to the overall employment. And this is in 13 countries. In over 21 countries, this percentage is between 10 to 15% of the entire workforce. So, which clearly puts a focus on the need to work for home-based workers. Now, the question is, why are we talking about home-based workers and not home workers? So let's look at a little bit of difference between what home workers there are and what home-based workers are. Also, just want to reiterate that within the home-based workers segment, there are 147 million women, which is around 56% of the home-based workers, and around 113 million men. So there is a gender divide here with more women in home-based work compared to men. If we look at the definitions of home-based workers and home workers, often we hear this common debate that home workers are not properly identified and they're not counted for. And once they're missing in the data and statistics, they're also missing in the policy and action. Just to give you an example, if we look at different kinds of home-based workers, we have first independent workers, workers who work, produce, and sell their products in the market or their services in the market. Then there are dependent or disguised workers who are also called as home-based workers, and generally we call them as self-employed own account workers. Then there are another type of workers who work from home, and those are employees. And again, within the employees, there are two categories. One are teleworkers. The teleworkers generally are of two types. One, who work from home on permanent basis, which means they don't go to the office. The home is the place of work. And then there are teleworkers who, on occasional basis, sometimes in a month, may choose to work from home, but they are regular employees of the company and they might do some kind of remote work. Now, when we look at home workers and home-based workers, generally the home-based workers are counted, the figure that I showed you before, and this includes the teleworkers who are on permanent basis, the workers who are self-employed and independent workers, but it also includes dependent or disguised workers. Now, these dependent and disguised workers are seen as own account, but are actually not. They are in non-standard forms of employment, or their employment is hidden, it's disguised, and they wrongly get classified as home-based workers where they should actually be home workers. And that's why the data on home workers is not readily available, and international labor statisticians are trying to figure out this red category, how to find these home workers who are in employment relationship. Having said that, there are three types of home workers, and it's a form of production that has survived several industrial and technological revolutions. It used to exist before and it exists now today as well. So we are very familiar with industrial home workers. We also have regular or permanent teleworkers, which is also increasing because of technology. And then we have another category of workers who are also home workers who work through digital platforms or crowd workers. But within the crowd workers, there are two kinds. One could be independent workers, but there are other crowd workers who may be dependent on the employer for quality check, for control, which is very similar to the industrial workers. So these are the three categories of home workers that we see today. And with technology, we see that homework is actually increasing. And you will hear more about it in the coming sessions. And the key challenges that relate to homework is about the invisibility, about low wages, about the health and safety, long hours, child labor, piece rate wages, migrants, huge proportion of women workers. So there are immense number of challenges when we talk about homework. The gap in data also exists because many times, the picture of the lady that you see here, this is the work which is done by men. It is etching on the glass, on a metal glass. And generally when you ask people, they say, no, women don't do this kind of work. But when you go in the village, when you go and see the home-based environment, you find many women who are doing this kind of work, which are generally perceived to be work done by men. We also have, when we look at wages and income and compare the piece rate with the minimum wage, we find that the wages are very, very low. Some of the exercises that we've done on piece rate wages in India and Nepal clearly show that home workers are paid very less. Similarly is the working conditions and OSH challenges. There are challenges in terms of health and safety, and most of the women are working in home-based sector, and our national policies on health and safety, our national health and safety programs do not have any data on women and work. What we've also seen is that subcontractors or agents, generally, they are seen as exploiters. But when we look at these agents and contractors, and when we meet them, we find that many of the home workers themselves turn into agents. So it is also possible that they also get exploited in the process. The pictures that you see here are from a remote village in Bareilly, where all the work has been rejected by the company which had given the work. And it's lying with the agents. And the agent's family, you see the agent's family here, the agent has died, he had a heart attack, because all the checks were bounced. And then there are home workers who want to set up their own collective to bypass the middlemen. And many times we've seen that there's a huge focus on this weakest link, rather than shifting the focus on the roles and responsibilities on all supply chain actors. What we can do, one of the critical things that we understand is that in case we want to promote decent work for home workers as well as home-based workers, we need to understand that there is a binary between employment and self-employment, and employment basically serves as a basis of labor regulation. And many of these workers actually don't have that employment relationship. So the question is, who is responsible for wages, social security, sickness, and their health? And also, how do we formalize informal employment relationships? And how do we cover the own account or self-employed workers who are also in the same precarious situations? And many times, many of these workers share multiple responsibilities. So what we really need is that we need a social dialogue, which is very critical. And the larger question is, how do we balance the needs of workers, businesses, and the government, and ensure accountability and responsibility across the supply chain? As Rohan mentioned, there are several international instruments which focus on human rights and business, and those could be from the labor side, from the environmental side, from the human rights side. They range from instruments of the ILO or other UN agencies. They also include multi-stakeholder initiatives. They include global unions, contracts, along with international framework agreements with different brands, sectoral and enterprise-led initiatives. But the challenge is that do they really reach the lower tiers of the global and domestic supply chain? All of the organizations who are present today and who will be speaking very clearly show that they're still not reaching the lowest tier of the supply chain. Some of the instruments which you're quite familiar with, and I'm not really going to talk through them, but there are instruments by the ILO and the UN, and similarly, there are sectoral initiatives, multi-framework agreements as well. Now, what can we do? Based on the learnings from the field, what we've seen is that we need a proper roadmap for engagement with government, employers, trade unions, as well as with global brands, looking at how do we build convergent actions and build capacities of the stakeholders, how do we promote the ILO Convention 177 on home workers, but also the recommendation 204 of the ILO on transitioning from informality to formality. What we've also seen is that community-based interventions are very, very critical because they give us an example, they help us innovate and learn lessons on how do we need to move forward. Last but not the least is to also work with brands and the employers and contractors, which form the key of the supply chain. This is kind of my last slide. What we've seen and what we've understood is that the role of the state is very critical when we're talking about home workers and home-based workers, also because here we're talking about invisibility, and since they're invisible both in data and statistics, they're invisible in the policy and also in the lawmaking process, and for which we need to engage with trade unions, employers, workers, and the brand. We need to balance the needs of the workers, businesses, and governments. Workers who are in the lowest tiers are not being reached, they are invisible. And how do we look at formalization of the informal economy? Because one of the critical challenges which have also been thrown up during the COVID times is this whole issue of unreachability for these workers, especially in the context of social protection. We really need the global agenda and mandate to actually come to the national level, and creating horizontal and vertical linkages of the existing structures within the countries, and having a more inclusive approach for a multi-pronged approach to work towards enabling visibility for home-based workers. Last, I just want to say that home worker has existed for centuries, and it continues to be very important today, I think even more important after the COVID. So this focus is very much needed for enabling decent work for home-based workers. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Bharti. As always, to the point and very, very clear. So Bharti is very clearly outlined where the gaps exist and what is required. Now we have to begin to look at how do we get to what is required through sort of the various ideas and thoughts that will be shared. There will be a Q&A at the end, Bharti, and others can put questions to you. Also, if questions do come in the Q&A or chat box, feel free to answer them online. So thank you once again. And now we move on to Smita Singh. Smita is a senior project manager delegation of the EU to India, and has been a huge, she's played a very critical role in supporting the issue of home working through the Hidden Home Workers project. That's something others will talk about more. But we are very, very happy to have Smita with us, and she's going to be sharing the European Union's efforts to promote responsible supply chains, human rights, and sustainable development in South Asia. So over to you, Smita.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lakshmi. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Smita Singh. I'm very happy to be speaking here at this platform, and thanks to Tradecraft and the project on hidden home workers that the EU is supporting, together with HomeNet South Asia and home workers worldwide. So on the European Union side, I would just like to take this platform to highlight that EU has been taking responsible businesses and the responsibility that lies on the businesses very seriously, and we do not see it indispensable or in isolation to any activities or initiatives that the EU is supporting. As a part of European Union's external actions of support, in Europe and outside Europe, promoting and supporting responsible business is key. We ensure that the human rights aspects, the environmental aspects are always assessed when the European Union is considering support to any project. And that is and really I can say that from the highest level of the EU authorities, that this is something that is very crucial in order to be kind of answerable also to the European Parliament, the European government, that in no way should any Europe supported action be leading to any kind of abuses to home workers or any other way. So just to highlight the European Union's commitment, the EU has been supporting the ILO conventions. The European Union has been supporting the European principles of responsible business, the corporate social responsibility, and also business and human rights. So, I mean, you would all agree that, there have been different terminologies which has been used by development partners. When we started, we started with, say, corporate social responsibility being, something which all businesses should commit to. And the European Union has been supporting very, very many projects in India, in Asia, which are aimed at capacity building, to creating dialogue, to businesses understanding their consequences of ignoring important aspects such as informal home workers. And through this hidden home workers project that I'm very happy to be associated with and managing this on behalf of the EU, we have seen that these sector of informal communities remain unnoticed till we reach an unforeseen and unpredictable scenarios such as COVID-19, where we saw that nobody knew how to deal with workers, as Ms. Bharti highlighted, sitting at home, whether they were being paid. I mean, suddenly when we had a lockdown and businesses stopped functioning, who were the people who were impacted the most? Were these informal communities. And with example of the Hidden Home Workers program, again, I can say that the EU was very flexible to adapt its program outline to ensure that whatever could be done to reach out or to benefit these informal workers in the garment sectors, in the footwear sectors, we helped bridge the gap to reach, the government schemes. In short, they had basic ration to take care of their needs, considering losing their wages for months at stretch would be very, very, harmful to them. So I think COVID-like situations highlight even more the need for businesses to be responsible and to take ownership of their commitments to responsible businesses. Now here, I would like to also stress on a few, global outlines or policies that the European Union has introduced over the past years, which the EU ensures are kind of taken care of. One example is the timber regulation of 2010, which sets out due diligence requirements to prevent the sale of illegal harvested timber. Second is, the non-financial reporting obligations that businesses have. This is, I'm talking in Europe, that they have to disclose how many people are involved in the projects, or in large companies, in banks, in insurance companies, and their obligation to report on environment and social issues, including due diligence processes, the adverse impacts also that their policies would have had. The third regulation that the European Union has, this was Trade for All, which was launched and adopted in 2015, where EU trade and investment policy, it sets out commitment for promoting human rights and responsible business standards. And this is on trade and sustainable development, and also links to the free trade agreements that the European Union endorses with a lot of third countries, where these human rights impact due diligence it forms a significant part of those agreements that the European Union undertakes. The other one is the conflict on minerals regulation that the EU adopted in 2017, which sets out a supply chain due diligence obligation on EU importers for various minerals like tin, titanium, gold, and the conflict affected or high risk areas that become binding in 2021. So you will see that some of these regulations, and the latest one I should mention is the EU's human rights and democracy commitment, which has ensured that EU will be assisting on national action plans for human rights in various countries, and engaging with businesses and financial institutions to help them meet their obligations. In this context, the European Union, in its Green Deal mandate, has also promoted a circular economy mandate, where we ensure that everything from waste management to obligations to global supply chains, they are all integrated, and there is a commitment on disclosures, on due diligence. So, I mean, just to say that, again, coming back to the COVID example, we have seen that, I think to start with, businesses have to be convinced on the role that they can play to reaching these vulnerable communities as the informal home workers. And I think today in the panel we have different sectors represented, and you will all agree that one thing is that people should be made aware. Firstly, they should acknowledge that what is the supply chain consisting of, where are the people coming from. Sometimes we've seen that even businesses are oblivious to this, to the tail ends, where are they going. So we all should, I think, work towards this due diligence process through the various projects. Donors like the EU are supporting projects where we are raising awareness amongst businesses, amongst civil society, amongst the home workers themselves, who are kind of made aware on what their rights are, how should they practice their rights, also using digitalization, I would say, as one of the key tools to empower these informal home workers. So European Union has been using various, I would say, modes and tools to build this capacity in the supply chain. I can mention here that EU, in partnership with UNDP, is supporting an Asia level project on business and human rights. So you can see that at the regional level also, the EU is trying to do its best and create awareness, capacity building through workshops and through various tools that are made available to businesses and to the informal workers and the civil society partners who are engaged in this sector. And I would just like to end here by saying that EU is committed to promote responsible businesses at the level, at the regional level, as well as all the markets that EU is supporting outside Europe. And through dedicated projects and engagements with civil society, with the UN, with ILO, with other development partners, we are trying to create more awareness on the side of businesses, on the side of civil society, on the need to be more responsible, to come out with disclosures, voluntary, or maybe, in the next few years, we would see they become mandatory disclosures, without which we cannot go forward. So I take this opportunity to just thank the organizers and also Tradecraft for, having the EU support this sector of business and human rights. And we are going to be partners in the coming years in this sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Smita. And your support and the EU support has been integral to some of the work that will be spoken about shortly. And all of you will hear about this project that Smita mentioned. So we move on. Thank you once again. We move on now to Sarbani Cattle, who is the project coordinator for HomeNet South Asia. She's based, she works for Sabah, Nepal, and she's going to share with us the processes and results of bottom-up mapping and ground-level research on working conditions for home workers in the supply chains in India and Nepal, with attention to the pre and post COVID-19 situation. And this is specifically with reference to the Hidden Home Workers project that we've been mentioning. So over to you, Sarbani.
Thank you, Lakshmi, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I see everyone is joining from a different time zone. Today, I will be discussing on understanding how home workers and their working conditions are, especially talking about initiatives to identify, track, and support home-based workers. Just to give you a brief background of HomeNet South Asia, we're basically a regional network of home-based worker organization, and we spread across 8 countries within South Asia. We have a total of 60 members. They include member-based organization, NGOs, trade unions, and as well as producer companies. And our core activities mostly focuses on research and advocacy, on organizing, on building partnership, livelihood, social security, and violence against women. In this presentation, I'll be focusing on 3 main points. The first one is understanding the working condition of women home workers in the garment supply chains of India and Nepal. This is a pre-COVID survey findings that we did under the Hidden Home Workers project. So I'll be sharing some key issues that came up. The second point within this presentation, I'll be briefly discussing the impact of COVID-19 on home-based workers, research conducted by HNSA with the support of IDRC. And finally, I would be discussing the current scenario of home workers in India and Nepal through the Hidden Home Workers project. So in regards to hidden home workers, condition of home workers within the garment supply chain of India and Nepal, this is a hidden home workers project, which is a multi-stakeholder-led transparency and traceability system, and which we focus from the lower tiers of the cotton and global value chains. And our main aim is to improve the working condition of home workers and their labor rights so that they're more visible within countries of Nepal, Pakistan, and India. So this is an initiative of Tradecraft Exchange, Home Worker Worldwide, HomeNet South Asia, and our affiliates, Sewa Bharat in Delhi, SAVE in Tirupur, Sabah Nepal, Class Nepal, HomeNet Pakistan. And we have a co-funded support by the European Union. So giving you the research design of this survey, it was led by Sewa Bharat in Delhi, SAVE in Tirupur, and Sabah Nepal. We have a total of 1,016 respondents, home worker respondents. And our data collection was conducted between November 2019 to March 2020. And we also conducted 3 KIs with our member organization to verify the findings. So our location is in India is Delhi and Tirupur, which consists of both the urban and semi-urban area. In Nepal, it consists of Kathmandu Valley, which is urban, and Sakusaba district, which is rural. So our main focus was on the apparel sector. So to give you a brief background of the respondents' characteristics, majority of the respondents belong to the age group of 31 to 40, followed by 18 to 30 in both India and Nepal. In terms of the marital status, majority of respondents, 86% in Nepal and 90% in India, were married. We also had few unmarried, widow, and divorced respondents as well. In regards to education, majority, 45% from Nepal and 41% from India, had secondary education and above. We also saw home-based worker who were able to provide signature only. That's 22% in Nepal and 23% in India, and also had a very basic level of reading and writing. Here, the primary earners are found to be husbands, 74% from Nepal and 86% from India. We also saw very few home-based workers who were the primary earner. So that was only 11% in Nepal and 8% in India. So in regards to the work detail, here we saw that in regards to the nature of work of home-based workers in Delhi, majority of home-based workers were involved in embellishment and embroidery and very few in stitching. In Tirupur, which is a garment hub in South India, majority were engaged in cropping, like 63%, followed by folding, embellishment, embroidery, and stitching. In Kathmandu Valley and Sankusava, majority of the respondents were involved in knitting. We also saw some stitching, weaving, and finishing quality control in Kathmandu, as well as weaving and stitching in Sankusava. So in regards to understanding where the work comes from for these home-based workers, in Delhi and Tirupur, majority of home-based workers receive work from their subcontractors or agents. In Kathmandu Valley, it was both subcontractor agents and community leaders, and in Sankusava, it was community leaders. So we also inquired about home-based workers' health as well as the behavior of the contractors towards them. So what we found out was that, especially in Delhi, majority, 66%, had eye strain or headache because of work, followed by back pain, cuts and wounds from needles, and neck and shoulder pain. In Tirupur, 72% did not have any health problems at all, but however, we did see a few of them had eye strain or headache, neck, shoulder pain, back pain, hip and leg pain. In Kathmandu, majority did not have any health issues, but those who did responded of having eye strain or headache, back pain, neck, shoulder pain, hip, leg pain. Some of them were also feeling very tired and sad all the time. In Sankusava, 52% had eye strain or headache. There were a few percentage of women who responded having no health problems. So in all locations, majority like eye strain or headache and back pain or leg pain was found to be a health issue for majority of home-based home workers. So we also inquired about subcontractors' agent behavior towards them. And in all locations, majority of respondents mentioned that they did not face any form of behavior. And one of the main reasons for this is that these home-based workers are organized into a member-based organization or a trade union or NGO in which they have already internalized their rights and how how subcontractors or other people should behave towards them. And subcontractors also realize that they need to provide work to home-based workers. You know, they need their work to get done. They also know that these home-based workers are organized, so they also refrain from misbehaving as well. However, in all locations, there were only verbal agreements, which meant that they were open to exploitation by these subcontractors. We also looked into the payment and minimum wage. In all locations, home-based workers were paid extremely low. $30 in Delhi, $30 in Tirupur, $51 in Kathmandu Valley, and $40 in Sankusava. And these are way below the national or country level minimum wage. We also asked them if they were aware about the country level minimum wage. Majority of them said no. And even though very few percent, like 15% in Kathmandu Valley or 2% of Tirupur who said yes, they were not able to provide the correct amount of the minimum wage as specified by their country. So we also looked into Social Security and social protection. In all locations, none of the home-based worker received any Social Security benefits from their employers or subcontractors. We also asked them about their awareness on government-provided social assistance schemes. Majority of them were aware about it. When we inquired more into this, especially in Tirupur and Delhi, majority of them were receiving ration cards and food support program. However, it was not the same in case of Kathmandu Valley and Sankusava, because we did not have the same level of social assistance programs. We do have Social Security, we do have maternity allowance, disability allowance, or single woman allowance, but these home-based workers did not qualify for those kind of schemes. We also looked into the transparency, especially looking at the market, the destination market for home-based worker products. So we asked them if they knew where their products went where they're exported to. So in Kathmandu Valley, 60% did not know, 35% mentioned it was in the international market. In Sankhussava, 69% did not know, however, 16% did say it goes to the international market. In Delhi, majority of them mentioned international market, and Tirupur, 97% mentioned that it's local market or small shops. So we inquired more on this in regards to Tirupur because it's a garment hub. We know from secondary sources that majority of the brands, outsource their work in Tirupur. So we found out, our data collectors found out from looking at the labels that home-based worker work on. And from the 150 labels identified, it was found that 32 labels were of those international brands. Also, when we further inquired from those home workers who knew where their products went to, especially the international market, they were not aware about the brands that they produced for or the country where the products were exported to. So there was a lot of transparency gap when we did this data collection. My next point in this presentation is understanding, just a brief understanding about the impact of COVID-19 it has had on home-based workers. This is the key findings from a study conducted by HomeNet South Asia. You can find this study online in our website. So during COVID-19, there was a lot of restriction in movement. The supply chain was completely halted. Home workers did not have access to work. Raw materials were so expensive. So because of this, many of the issues came up, especially first of all was that home-based workers were into crisis. They did not have enough food or essential to go on about. They had no work and they had no earnings as well. They also had very limited public relief. Because they're invisible, their data was not available to the government agencies to provide them any assistance. So they were not able to access some of the relief programs by the government. And also they were dependent upon family savings, this very poor savings that they had. They had to pawn their assets, and they also had to increase borrowing from the family or money lenders. So home-based workers were extremely, especially those working in supply chain, were extremely affected by the COVID-19. However, there was things that worked. So the first one is the leadership of organization catering to these home-based workers. Home-based worker organization did their best to support home workers. They provided them relief materials. They linked them to government programs. They provided psychosocial counseling. They assisted them in livelihood support. Also, because so they were mainly the leadership of this organization was amazing during this COVID-19 pandemic. The second point was that those home workers who were engaged in cooperative or producer companies were better able to recover, because these cooperative and producer companies had links with local government, with different organizations, different factory, in which they got orders to make PPPs, PEEs, and mask, and all essential items that were required during the COVID-19. So they were able to provide work to home-based workers. We also saw that organized home workers are better able to access Social Security and social assistance programs provided by the government, because home-based worker organization would basically cater to these organized home workers and link them to different schemes provided by the government. Now, going to the next point, the current scenario of home-based workers in India and Nepal through the Hidden Home Workers Project. So majority of home-based workers still have not been able to get work within the supply chains. Majority are also looking at diverse ways in which they can earn an income. Some are going in the agriculture sector, some are going into the construction sector. However, within this project, we're really focusing on getting these unorganized home-based workers within this project so that we can assist them. So the main activities within the Hidden Home Workers Project is, first of all, we're trying to do a cluster level human rights due diligence activity in partnership with those interested brands, especially in India and Pakistan, so that they understand, the home-based worker condition, and they also recognize home-based workers within the supply chain. We're also tracing home-based workers Because of this supply chain survey that we did, our member organizations are able to have a database on home-based workers, so that in order for them to get any facilities, they can easily, take out their data and the numbers and names of home-based workers and help them. We're also trying to understand home-based worker conditions so that we can properly address their issues and needs. So some of the major activities that we're doing is organizing unorganized home workers and linking them with these home-based worker organization or trade unions or non-government organization. We're also trying to facilitate their access to social assistance programs. We're providing training, orientation on occupational health and safety, violence against women, and also we're starting the digital literacy as well. We're also in the process of supporting access to basic services like water, sanitation, and we also striving towards visibility of home workers, especially towards policies, campaign, and advocacy. Like what Smriti had mentioned, we also, because of the funding from EU, we were able to provide emergency relief support to home-based workers, also provide COVID-19 awareness, and also support their livelihood. So within this project, we're really stressing for the organizing part and creating access to social assistance program, and also helping them get different forms of training so that they're better aware about who they are. So yeah, this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. I'm really happy to answer any questions or queries you have in the chat box.
Thank you, Sarbani, for a very concise presentation. You can chat with Sarbani now if you have questions, or otherwise after Lucy's presentation, there will be a Q&A as well. So thank you once again, and we move on to the next section today. I'm very, very happy to invite Mr. Shyam Agarwal, who's the General Manager and Chairman of Radiant Expo Vision, which is a supplier who works with a number of home workers. It's not very usual to be able to bring a supplier into a human rights forum so openly, and we are very, very grateful to Mr. Agarwal to agreeing to come and sharing his journey with him, because his is a very interesting story. We are going to keep this in a very simple Q&A format where we'll put a few questions to him and he's going to answer that. And so his session will be focusing on recognizing and supporting home workers in the home textile supply chain. So welcome again, Mr. Agarwal. Very, very happy to have you. Let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your story, and why do you believe, we chatted the other day and you told us why home workers and people who work with their hands are so critical, not just to the country, but to the world. And you were talking about their level of skills and so many other things. So tell us a little bit about your journey, and who you work with, and how many home workers and so on. Let's get started from there, and then I'll ask you more questions. So over to you, Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you, Lakshmi ji. Good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my journey, or you can say experiences, working with home workers in my company. I work for Radiant Expo Vision. This company started operations in 1991 in New Delhi from a small place in a rented area. Today we have 5 factories in NCR. Most of them are in Noida, Uttar Pradesh, and one in South India. We have around 4,500 workers directly employed in these companies across all factories. And I'm proud to be associated with this company for past 25.5 years. Like I'm heading a team which is called Radiant Management Team. Radiant Management Team is basically responsible to take decisions on policy, procedures, capacity and capability building, business sustainability, and matters that can impact our business. Our company is exporters of and manufacturer of home textile products. we are doing basically bed linen products like quilts, sham, bed skirts, comforters. Then we are doing living room products like cushion covers, curtain, throws, and then kitchen linen items like hand glove, pot holders, apron, table linen like tablecloth, table mat, table runners. We do toys, we do fashion accessories, we do wall hangings, we do also bags, etc. So basically, all these products needs lot of home working. Home working. We have around 3,750 home workers, 3,750 registered home workers that work on our products in 4 states. And it is spread in around 100 square miles. There may be more than 200 villages where these workers are working on our products. You see, most of our products are designer products. These products basically need lot of embellishment works, and this is our strength. I can say that these home workers are adding values to our products, and these products are so attractive that we have almost in last 10 years increased our turnover by 10 times. Even during COVID-19 uh, time, our products were selling very good in USA and Europe. And during that period also, we were able to sustain our business and were able to give businesses to our home workers.
That's very heartening to know, sir. And of course, we will continue to have many conversations with you. But for the purpose of this, so that's a vast networks. You have 3,750 registered home workers,
Right.
in 4 states. Now, tell us a little bit about the worker initiatives that you have. You mentioned you've been working with Nest, on the behest of some of your brands. And while you're telling us a bit more about the work you're doing, also do refer to the registration and the complaint system that you shared the other day. So it would be very interesting for us and our audience to hear about that.
Uh, Honestly speaking, informally, we started working with these home workers to improve their working conditions almost 5 years back. At that time, there was no pressure from any of our brands. So we were doing at all these initiatives at our own. Means we wanted to develop them. We wanted to
Right.
develop their skills. We wanted to help them. We wanted to support them because we understood that these people are very important for our supply chain. And today or tomorrow, it is going to become risk for our businesses as well. So just in 2018, one of our brand had introduced Nest. Nest is a non-profit organization. It is based in USA, and then our brand had means we accepted our brand's request and started working with Nest. We were doing all basic things. For example, we knew how to register the workers, home workers. We were trying to map all the home workers in our supply chain. We were doing all required documentation to ensure the child labors are not used in our supply chain, and then proper wages are given. We were also conducting time and motion study to establish the right time so that the correct wages are given to the workers. But there were so many flaws in that system. I openly admit it, and it is right time to accept. If we want to make improvement, we will have to accept the mistakes or
Yes,
probably
sir.
uh, where we were wrong. So Nest has helped us in many ways. For example, how to conduct proper time and motion studies. Earlier, we were doing it in our office, like we were having some 4 or 5 sample workers, and time and motion studies are conducted. Then we came to know, no, it's not a fair method. We will have to go to home workers' place, identify, for example, if we are conducting TMS motion study the 6 workers. So these 6 workers should be from different background, different skill level. One, high productivity, medium productivity, and low productivity. So we will identify, or we will find out the average time of these 6 workers, and that should be the exact time considered to give them the wages. Secondly, maintaining like their records, documents. You see, advanced management system was not very strong earlier. We were maintaining the passbooks. These passbooks are issued immediately to the home workers whenever they are registered with us. These passbooks are having information about their rights, complaint management system, how much pieces are being given to them, how many pieces are collected, what is the price of per piece, what is the total wages, and ensuring that the wages are given on or before 10th of every month. So all these records are maintained in these passbooks. However, advanced system was not very strong. It is a very common practice. Most of the home workers, they ask for the advances, and it was not recorded earlier properly. You see, it is very simple word, advances. We know the risk associated with advances. Sometimes these workers take a huge amount from the subcontractor or maybe the group leader, and then the workers can be forced to work without wages until they return the entire amount, or you can say in lieu of interest of that amount. So by formalizing these advanced management, now it has been made sure that no one is left paying the wages. That, you see, earlier it was noticed. I was asking a question from Sabrina. I wanted to ask a question, why it is a hidden project. So the same question came in my mind. Probably they have used the word hidden because they know that these home workers are not very vocal. They are, they may be scared to talk to anyone about their problems, issues. For example, if the correct wages are not given, and if they make a complaint to subcontractor or maybe directly to our management, like we are the principal employer, and if they make a complaint that we are not getting proper wages, probably they may be discriminated. Subcontractor can stop their work, working with them. Even if they complain about the wages are not given in right time, or maybe calculation is not correct. So we had developed a system of complaint management. You see, every passbook has 3 numbers, 3 cell phone numbers of principal employer, like radiant compliance team number. So if anyone is having any complaint about the wages, about the time and motion study, about the misbehavior or any kind of discrimination, so they can make direct complaint to radiant compliance team. Then we have clearly trained them, educated them how their grievances or complaints will be handled. For example, if anyone complains, first of all, they should be assured that their name will not be disclosed. Our compliance team is trained how to handle these complaints or grievances. So our team will visit in that area. They will visit at least 10-15 home workers, and then they will interview, they will verify their records, and they will establish that yes, the complaint is genuine, and then we can work with subcontractors to take the remedial action, as well as then we will take the corrective action so such situation doesn't reoccur in future. So in this entire process, the identity of complainant will never be disclosed. So this is the best idea about this complaint management system. So they are not victimized, they are not discriminated. So
Yes,
with
sir.
this aim, yes.
Yes, sir. Great. Thank you so much. Lots to learn from you, and thank you for your openness. Very quickly, why the project is called Hidden Home Workers is, you've addressed part of it, but it's just that in the informal spaces, most workers still do not have an identity. They are not really either known or acknowledged for the role and the contribution that they play in the global supply chain. So this effort to bring in more transparency and get them out from the shadows into the light is what our common work is all about. And there's lots to learn from you as we walk this journey together. So my last question to you, and you'll have to answer this in about a minute, since we are running out of time,
Sure.
is so what have been some of your key learnings working with such a large group, most of them in their own home environments, with a focus on how have you seen when women are impacted positively from either capacity building or through sort of enhancing their finances, what really changes in the society? And the last part of that question is, as a supplier, Agarwalji, what do you need from the other stakeholders? What support do you need from the brands, from the civil society and the government to continue to build a business that can benefit everybody?
Okay, Lakshmiji, thank you. This is wonderful question actually. You see, when we visit these home workers' place, we ask this question: uh, How do you spend this money? What you earn from this home working uh, job? So you see, their answers are really very interesting. Sometimes they say that it is for my personal buying personal care products, for example, lipsticks. So it is very funny answers they give sometime, because most of these women says, even sometimes they say that it is helpful for their children's education.
Yes.
Sometimes they spend this money on tuition fees. So some of these women are using this money for their basic needs. Some of these women are using this money for another luxury items even. So it is very interesting to see how these money can change their lives. But anyway, it is very interesting to know all these things, how they are spending this money and how it is changing their lives, what role it plays in their life. You
Sure.
see, being supplier, first of all, it is the supplier that can change everything. Firstly, it is supplier. They will have to change their mindset. They will have to understand the importance and significance of these home workers. You see, being an being manufacturer, I know my strength. I know my weaknesses. Honestly accepting, I cannot beat China when a product is made from the machine. So my strength is embellished products. My strength is my traditional way of working on product like handicrafts item. So I should work on my strength. If I want to work on my strength, I will have to make sure that these workers are getting proper wages. They are not demoralized. They are not disgraced, and they are not migrating to the cities, leaving this traditional work behind. So it
Yes.
is in my interest. Brand should also understand, if sometime if the product is made by home workers, and if we want to pay them correct wages, we wanted to make sure that they are being supported properly. Like earlier, we were discussing about giving them social security benefits as well.
Right.
Today we are fighting to give them minimum wages, but sometimes it happens that brands go behind. They say, oh, no, 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 if the cost is coming high, so we will shift to the machine products. So ultimately the brands are not supporting. I'm not talking about all the brands. They will have to make sure, they will have to understand, even if we are propagating that these products are made by the home workers, and if it costs little bit extra, I believe that customers are willing to means pay some extra money if these products are made by home workers, and if they understand, yes, it is really paid to them and they are contributing to improve the life of these home workers. So definitely brand can also contribute to
Yes.
these things. And government, of course,
Yes.
government has to strict. They will have to make necessary changes. Even minimum wages are not implemented honestly. There is no monitoring agencies,
Yes.
those who are means participating in this process, ensuring. So I believe that even government can provide them markets. You know the concept of hearts. Unfortunately, the hearts are
Yes.
there, but the actual profit is not going to the workers, those who are making that product. In between there are
Yes.
intermediaries. It is being sold at very high cost in these hearts. So we should make
Yes.
sure, government should make sure that the profit goes in the hands of the real home workers, those who are producing that goods. So everyone can make sure, contribute, participate in this process. And yes, it is true. Together we can make any changes. Alone, probably not.
Excellent point, sir. So I'm jotting notes, in my diary, and there happens to be a quotation which is there on this page, which says, "When you need to innovate, you need to collaborate." So absolutely, I think we need each other, and you're very right about the consumers and their awareness, which is a role civil society can play beautifully, because a study conducted by GAP, I used to work for GAP for a number of years, a study conducted by GAP with our consumers showed that anything they were willing to pay up to $1 extra if they knew that the extra money was going to go for a social cause in the producer company. So I think there are many innovative ways one can look at really, getting to what you're talking about, which is the money going back to the people who really deserve it. So thank you once again. If there are questions, it'll be the Q&A after the next presentation. Once again, we are very, very grateful to have had you here today. Thank you, Mr. Agarwal.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
Okay, so now we move on to our last presentation today, and this is about the best practices in the supply chain transparency for home workers in the apparel and footwear value chains in South Asia. And we're delighted to have with us Lucy Brill, who's the Director of Home Workers Worldwide, who's been doing so much of work since so long on this very critical issue and holding the flag high for home workers from wherever she is. So over to you, Lucy, to tell us about the Hidden Home Workers Project Learning Report on Transparency in the Apparel, Footwear and Comparable Value Chains.
Great. Well, thank you, Lakshmi. It's great to be here. Could we have my first slide, please? Yeah, I have to trust that it's there. Yeah, I'm sorry, I can't see. Okay, well, it's great to be here today. And I'm proud to be part of the Hidden Home Workers Project, working with Tradecraft Exchange and HomeNet South Asia, and with our local partners in India, Pakistan, and Nepal. And I'm going to talk today about a piece of research that we've done that's been to produce a toolkit that's aimed at working with suppliers like Mr. Agarwal and brands to improve transparency and working conditions for home workers within global supply chains. At the next slide, please. Okay, the next slide. So this really is this is a typical map of a supply chain. And you can see the brands at the top, the supplier factories, intermediaries and home workers at the bottom. And then you can see the complexity. I mean, this is obviously simplified for the purposes of making a picture, but links go between different subcontractors and different suppliers. And it also is often changing. There might be times when there's a lot of work and times when there's less work. But when we're saying in recognizing that supply chains are complicated, the challenge of what we're trying to do is to recognize that human rights, everybody involved in that supply chain is entitled to their human rights and to be recognized as workers. And I think that's the key aim of this project, really, is to increase recognition for home workers. And also for the intermediaries. I think a really important point was made earlier that oftentimes the intermediaries are from the same communities as the home workers, and we need to understand the roles that different people are playing and ensure that they are all able to get a decent livelihood from their work. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so as part of the Hidden Home Workers Project, Home Workers Worldwide has been working with Cividep India and with Tradecraft Exchange to produce a toolkit, as I've said. And then we started this project by carrying out some research. We interviewed 15 practitioners. This included people from brands, people from multi-stakeholder initiatives, people from NGOs and one trade union, looking at the different ways in which people had worked with home workers in the past, what had been achieved, what were the challenges they'd faced, And the idea really was to draw together the learning from that process and to draw together templates and examples of what had been done, so that we could produce a toolkit that other people could use. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm just turning off there. Okay, I'll just go very, I think Bharti covered a lot of this slide, but really just to say, as she explained, it is really difficult to measure dependent home workers within supply chains. But there have been attempts by civil society organizations to come up with estimates. So, I mean, there's a figure of 37 million home-based workers in India and 4 million in Pakistan. And then from that, the estimate is that the 3.5 million of those women home workers are working actually in supply chains within apparel and footwear brands. Now that is an estimate, but that is a significant number of women. I think the size of the labour force in that industry is 45 million. So it is a significant number of people. And certainly from the work that we've been doing, I mean, this project is focusing on South Asia, but brands have reported finding home workers in China, in Vietnam, in Italy, even in the UK. And this is industrial home workers doing assembly work or stitching work. However, we do know that the attempts to monitor supply chains very rarely find the home workers in, say, for example, audits. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, so this is really looking at why is it so difficult? Why do audits not find home workers? What are the problems? What's the challenge in terms of finding home workers? And here, when we asked this of the people we interviewed, almost everybody said that a real problem is the messages they're getting from brands. So many brands are saying that we don't want home working in our supply chain. That there's a real message that comes across. Is that homework is a problem and let's get rid of it. Let's just make sure it's not happening. Now, obviously, if brands are saying that to their suppliers, the suppliers are not going to disclose homeworking. So that creates this unwillingness. And basically, once people start being reluctant to talk about what's going on, it's impossible, obviously, then to monitor and to find out what is actually happening and to look at how to improve things. And I think the third reason really is I mean, I think Mr. Agarwal touched on this, but the vulnerable position, and it also came across really from Sabani's presentation, that home workers are in an incredibly vulnerable position. They're employed informally, they have no contract. They're very rarely organised in trade unions. Though obviously HomeNet South Asia member organisations are really working really hard to address that. But even when they are organised, because they're informally employed, it's very difficult for them to report problems. And as a result, that also contributes to them remaining hidden. Okay, next slide, please. This slide really is a little bit more about what I was talking about, the cycle of denial, that if brands ban home working, it basically creates, it drives home workers further underground. It means that the subcontractors are told, make sure the home workers stay hidden, make sure that we all pretend that all the work is being done in the factory. And that actually makes it even harder for the home workers to speak out, and often also means that the conditions get even worse. There may be extra layers of intermediaries that are introduced. So that is like a vicious cycle that can cause that actually creates more risks to the home workers and more risk of problems, for example, child labour. It means wages get even lower. So what we would be encouraging, based on the interviews with the practitioners, I think almost every practitioner said that the key point, the first step, is that brands need to give suppliers permission to disclose that they use home workers. They need to recognise, if brands have a policy that says we welcome home working within our supply chain, we recognise this is a valuable way of working, that gives suppliers permission to disclose that sometimes they might be using subcontractors who also use home workers. And once you have that permission, It means that people can start talking about what's going on and being open about things, and then home workers come out of the shadows, and we can begin to recognise that they are entitled to rights and begin to work together to improve things. Okay, next slide, please. So this drawing on the interviews, what did people say were the key facilitators, the important things that can actually improve transparency within supply chains? So as I've said, the first thing really is that brands have a clear policy on home workers, a clear commitment that they recognise home working as a valid way of working, and also that they commit to working with suppliers to address home working. And they commit to recognising that home workers have a right to be involved in those processes. Now, that in terms of doing that, that also implies a strong supplier brand relationship, a level of trust between the parties. So obviously it makes it easier if it's a brand that has been sourcing goods from this supplier for many years. Also, if the products are something that is a solid part of the supply chain, it's likely to stay within the supply chain. We know that, and we did some work on leather footwear, and we worked with a brand on a shoe that was sold, that was a back to school shoe. So it was sold, they knew that every year they were going to have lots and lots of families wanting to buy these shoes for their children. So it was really important to them that product remained seen as an ethical product, and it also gave strength to that relationship. I think that the next step is brand purchasing practices. I think building on that solid supplier relationship, the brand needs to recognise that its purchasing practices are really important in terms of the working conditions. So I think Mr. Agarwal mentioned about if you're going to be doing time and motion studies, ensuring that home workers are entitled to the minimum wage, that will inevitably put a small amount of money on the purchasing price, and that needs to be coming down the supply chain in the purchasing practice. Likewise, deadlines, and if we don't want home workers to have to work very long hours to complete large orders that are given at the last minute, there needs to be a process for scheduling orders, for managing that process.
Hi there, Lucy. Just coming in here. I think there is some there's some blurring, I think, in the slide. So what we'll try to do is just to refresh that. I think Rabina from the team is going to do that now.
Okay,
so that it'll be clear to everyone. Yeah.
Yes, sorry about this. If just a few moments for me to reshare this.
It's still not brilliant, is it?
Yeah, how's the quality looking now?
It's not great.
Well, marginally better. So
Yeah,
people are requesting for the
should.
presentation, maybe it can be sent out later. So
Of course. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I don't quite know why.
No, it's probably a bandwidth thing, Lucy. I don't think it has anything to do with you, really.
Yeah. Okay, we were on facilitators of transparency. So a couple more slides further on. Yeah, keep going. Next one. That's it. Okay. So we got to brand purchasing. Okay, I'll just to finish the slide before, the other things that are really important is to have organizations that can reach out to the home workers. And I think, again, Mr. Agarwal is giving a really nice example. He's talking about them working with home workers that are across 4 different states. It's very difficult to reach out and to reach the different home workers if you haven't got people on the ground who can help you do that. So I think that is a real strength of this particular project, that we've got a network of partner organizations who can do that. And I think the aim of those organisations is very much to organise the home workers so that the home workers themselves can be involved in this process. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, IT and digital solutions. I mean, this is something that everybody is really excited about. I think the potential is clearly there, but certainly from the work we did, we didn't really find any functioning tools at the moment. Apart from, I mean, I know the ILO are doing some really exciting training work and some networking work, bringing workers together using Facebook. And clearly there is potential there, but I think there are also concerns. Obviously, a key issue is whether home workers have access to technology and also access to electricity. And that is an issue in some communities. So that's very important. It's also whether the home workers themselves can use the technology. Do they need training and support in order to do that? And then if you're designing a solution that's about transparency, is it also working for the home workers? It may be working for the brand and the supplier to trace the product, but it also needs to work for the home workers to enable them to talk with each other and to enable them to feed back to the employer. So I think it is really important that that principle of two-way transparency is remembered and is held as a priority. Yeah, so, and I think, yeah, so obviously if you're trying to develop a pilot project, talking to the home workers themselves is absolutely crucial to work out, will this work in this community? Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so really this is some of the lessons that came out of this study. That there are practical tools, there are some really good examples of how people have improved transparency within home worker supply chains. So I guess the important lesson to get across is that this is not impossible to do. And it can be made to work and can be made to work efficiently, and it can actually improve the business relationships and the quality of the product. However, it does take time. It's a trust building process, and having a credible local civil society partner is really important. That can also be because there's often issues around gender, as many home workers are women, but there also may be issues around caste, for example, particular communities that may be doing particular kinds of homework, or religion, so leather footwear, for example. There's a lot of people from the Muslim communities. So that having a local partner who's aware of some of those issues is really important. I think working collaboratively, if you can get a situation where more than one brand will agree to work together, that obviously increases the leverage and increases the ability to support the suppliers. And again, having more than one supplier to work together can make it more, you know, it's very difficult if an agent is getting work from some 2 or 3 suppliers. If one of them starts developing a registration system, but he's not doing that for the rest of his work, then it obviously is not going to be very difficult. Yeah, the importance of the home worker policy as kind of opening the door, really, as enabling people to start talking, enabling the home workers to recognise themselves as workers. I think that policy is really important. Multi-stakeholder initiatives can also have a role here. Again, partly about bringing people together, enabling that collaborative approach. And I think, again, a little plug for the Hidden Home Worker Project. We are here for the next 2 or 3 years, and we're really keen to work with brands and suppliers to build on the practice that already exists, but also to develop new best practice. So to take this work forward. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, these are really, the next slides are very, I'm just going to run through them quite quickly, but it's just to give you an idea of the different areas of work that are included within our toolkit that we will be publishing very soon. So we have, for example, templates on home worker policies. Once you've got a policy, what do you do with it? How do you ensure that your suppliers take it seriously? So one brand, for example, produce a questionnaire of all of its suppliers about whether or not they use home workers and subcontractors. There's then a process of mapping the supply chain. So once home working is disclosed, you would be asking the supplier to be prepared to map that supply chain, to work with your civil society partner, to get in touch with the different intermediaries that may be involved, and ultimately to reach the home workers and find out what is going on at the moment. And if there are gaps in transparency, for example, it's looking at, well, here's some simple, a passbook might be introduced, or a job card system. Transparency around the piece rate is really important. I mean, it's great to hear time and motion studies being mentioned. I think oftentimes piece rates have been the same piece rate for the last 10 years. So actually having a system where piece rates are reviewed and are linked to the minimum wage to ensure that home workers can earn a decent living is really important. Giving home workers a voice, two-way transparency, that's also really important. So access to grievance, some system where the home workers can be represented, but not just access to grievance, also ability to be involved in this process, to feed back, to work out how to make this system work better. Yeah, and I think that's also that ownership also makes these processes much more sustainable too. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, these are really examples of what can be done at different stages in the supply chain. So if home working, say, is disclosed and mapped, it may then be about working with the different stakeholders in the supply chain to say, well, what does good look like in this supply chain? What's going on at the moment? And how do we build on the systems that are in place now to maybe bring them up nearer to the minimum standards that should be there? So simple systems about setting piece rates, but also crucially support for suppliers and intermediaries as they introduce changes. So for example, in one supply chain we've mapped, the agents were not being paid for the work. The agents were doing an important task of taking the leather uppers from the factory to the home workers, so incurring transport costs, taking a lot of time about quality control, but they were not being paid independently of the payments that the home workers were to receive. So inevitably they were taking money out of the home workers' money to be paid themselves. So I think it's about recognizing the roles of different people in that supply chain and paying people for what they were doing. And also including the home workers as active partners within that process. And that might also be about helping them access social protection. I mean, that ideally that would come through the supply chain, but there may also be local schemes that are available. For example, manual workers welfare boards in Tamil Nadu. Some home workers have been enrolled in that, and that gives them a minimal level of social protection. So it's a step in the right direction. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go through this. I think you can read these slides, especially
the slides will be sent out. Yes.
Yeah. But this is just really to give you an idea of the different. So we've got some good examples of good practice from other brands, and we've got a model child labour policy. There's also a toolkit that focuses particularly on the issue of child labour and how to address that issue. And also a model MOU. If you're going to be working with a civil society partner, it's often really, and working with the agents and with the supplier, it's often useful to set a set of ground rules before you start. But also basic questionnaires for engaging with home workers, for discussions with subcontractors and agents. Tools to make this work easier, basically. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, I think I'll leave that one for you to read. It's just another list of more things that are in the toolkit that people can use.
They've been working very hard, as you can see. So, a whole host of things.
Yeah. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, and this is the last slide really, but this is just really to explain what we are offering through this project. I mean, we basically, the Hidden Home Workers Project wants to work with brands and suppliers to encourage them to recognise where they're up to in this journey of working with home workers, and we will support you at whichever stage you're at. So it might be about adopting a home worker policy. It might be about, okay, I've got a policy, I've got a supplier that says they use home workers, but what do we do now? So then it's about working out how do we map that supply chain? How do we find a local civil society partner who can reach out to the home workers, who could potentially offer training and support? I mean, that's through this project, we've got partners on the ground in different parts of India, Nepal and Pakistan. And then once you've reached out to the different stakeholders, agreeing an action plan, agreeing a way forward. As I said before, including purchasing practices, it's really important that all stakeholders along the chain are recognise their responsibilities. And often the brand is the one with the more power and more of the value at that end of the chain. So that needs to come down the chain a bit. But there also needs to be transparency to make sure it goes right down. And then wherever possible, we would be encouraging brands and suppliers to work together so that we're about improving conditions within a region, within a sector. And again, look at that's really important for sustainability and encouraging sort of longer term change. So thank you. I think
Thank you.
One slide that's just the final.
Oh, is that? Okay.
So the final, yeah, okay. So this is just the final slide. So thank you very much to everyone for listening and for this opportunity. And I'm really happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Lucy. And, we will share the slide during the Q&A, the contact slide. So I know there are people who want presentations and, they want to know more about the resources, availability, and so on. So the last slide or Rohan may have another slide which he can leave on when we get into the Q&A part. Okay, so we have a couple of questions here, and I'm going to take this. This was addressed to Lucy, but maybe Sarbani can also chip in. And this is from Marilyn Bettis, and the question is, how can you and also how did you support livelihoods for the workers during pandemic? So if you want to have a go at this first, Lucy, and then maybe Sarbani can talk a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I think the situation of the pandemic and obviously the lockdowns and also the way in which many brands cancelled orders, that obviously had a massive impact right down the supply chain. But I think it's important really it highlighted the vulnerability of home workers. So I think in a way it brought out that risk. I mean, home workers largely had no access to social protection through their work. They're not entitled to PFI schemes or any social insurance. And many are also migrants, and so it finds it even difficult to access even the subsistence schemes. I mean, I'll pass over, I'm sure Sarbani can explain a little bit more about the ways in which HomeNet South Asia and the partners have responded.
Sure, thank you, Lucy. So in terms of livelihood, what I mentioned in the slide is that many of the home-based workers who are organized into a producer company or a cooperative, they have been able to access the livelihood opportunities from the producer company because they're getting orders from local factories, from international organization, from from local domestic brands to make masks and PPEs. And also through the Hidden Home Workers Project, co-funded by European Union, we also set aside some funds that we provided to our member organizations such as Sewa Bharat Delhi branch and as well as Sabha Nepal, so that they could also support some of the home-based workers who are really in dear need of some wages and through the livelihood program. So it's from both either through a cooperative or producer companies who are able to get orders from different sources. They're supporting their members and providing job. It may not be a full-time job, but at least part-time so that they could sustain. They can have enough funds to at least buy essential items, foods, and other daily essentials. And also from this Hidden Homeworkers project, we have also been supporting through our member organization as well.
Thank you, Sarbani. There's a quick question for Bharti from ILO, which somebody sent me, and I'm asking, so ILO has been working on the Sustainable Global Supply Chain Project. Bharti, can you tell us a little bit more about this, and really, really quickly, because we have to move towards the summary now, but we'd love to hear about that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Lakshmi. The project works in South Asia. It works in Nepal, India, and Sri Lanka. And we're working with the trade unions and membership-based organizations. It's a collective group, and many of the organizations are also present here. And we are looking together as a national working group on working on strategic agenda, like drafting the national policy. Also looking at how do we enhance health and safety, improve data and statistics. How do we enable access to rights and entitlements for not just home workers, but other informal and own account workers, because social protection is one of the largest challenge for such workers. We're working with, for example, Nepal government to include health and safety for informal workers in the national OSH programs and policies. And similar thing we'll be trying in India and Sri Lanka as well. With the sectoral employers organizations, many of these organizations have been trained as trainers in health and safety at small workplaces. And also we've trained them on calculation of piece rate wages. As Mr. Agarwal was saying, it was very exciting to hear from him. Similar thing is being done in the 3 countries, where the employers are also being taught how to calculate piece rate wages, along with the similar training for trade unions and the government. So we've also worked with the Uttar Pradesh government and Tamil Nadu government on these piece rate calculations. Third thing that we're trying to look at is how do we visualize data and statistics on home workers within the national framework of data collection, and also looking at different alternate approaches to formalizing the informal economy. How do we formalize informal enterprises, and how do we formalize employment relationships which are hidden? But not everything can be formalized. So what lies ahead for workers whose employment cannot be formalized and they cannot access the rights which are available to other workers? So far, we have organized and unionized around 15,000 workers, largely women, using a specially designed participatory approach by central trade unions. We've also done leadership trainings, and cooperatives and collectives are being formed, and also registered around 150 women-led micro enterprises and helped them formalize. And this has all been done using a tripartite mechanism of social dialogue. And some of the state governments and Nepal government are taking this forward using a tripartite plus approach. So these are some of the things that we've been also working with the brands to see how we can take this forward. Some of the issues that Lucy mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Bharti. And, engaging with you is a part of the whole process anyway. So hopefully a lot more confluence coming. So thank you again. And with that, I now hand over to Rakesh Supkar, who's the head of Tradecraft India, to do the quick summary and show us the way forward. Over to you, Rakesh.
Rakesh, you're on mute.
Hi, yes. Thank you so much, Lakshmi, and thanks to all the panelists for the very engaging discussion. I think all the participants, for the various questions that they have asked, and the engaging and the patient listening. I think it has been a great engaging session. We started, of course, with Bharti representing the ILO, sharing about the widespread nature of home-based work and informal work, the different range and the profile of home-based workers, and what kind of issues and challenges that they face, and she also alerted us to the various global conventions that reiterate the rights of the home-based workers and the informal sector workers, and what the different stakeholders, including the state, including the business, the local level suppliers, all how they can contribute and how it is important for all the stakeholders to come together to look at the issues and challenges faced by the home workers to address them. And then following Bharti, of course, Smita from spoke on behalf of the European Union, and she shared the EU's commitment to business and human rights, and how through their efforts they want to ensure that there isn't any violation of anybody's human rights in the operation of any of EU's programs or any of the businesses that the European businesses are, or the operations of the European businesses. The various initiatives that the European Union has been contributing to, its supporting, which is looking at bringing in multiple stakeholders to address the issues of informal workers and home workers. It was really reassuring to see the commitment from global organizations and support organizations to the rights of to the human rights of informal and home-based workers. And then we heard from Sarvani from the HomeNet South Asia Trust, and who was also representing all of their member organizations who all directly work with home-based workers. And she shared with us about the working conditions of home workers before the pandemic hit them and the various challenges that was facing them. The impact that this pandemic of COVID-19 and the lockdown and economic recession, what kind of an impact it had on the home-based workers. And of course, the current scenario of how we are looking at addressing them, how HomeNet South Asia with its member organization is trying to address some of their issues across India, Nepal, and Pakistan through the Hidden Home Workers program. We had the great pleasure of hearing Mr. Shyam Agrawal from the Radiant Export as a supplier, and it was really good to hear somebody who demonstrated that it is quite possible for commercial business enterprises to engage with home workers, to recognize home workers in their supply chain, and work with, for his own company. He demonstrated, how they're working with 3,750 home workers they've got registered across 4 states in India, and how they've been able to put in place a complaints management system, transparency around advances, around wage payment. So it's really an exemplary piece of work, and I hope a lot of other small and medium enterprises can follow this lead, and brands that are working with these with suppliers and exporters would allow for experimentations on this, so that there is greater transparency around homework. And of course, we heard from Lucy from the Home Workers Worldwide and the Hidden Home Workers Program on some of the best practices around recognition of home-based work and ensuring their rights. She spoke about how complex the supply chain is and how recognition of human rights should not be sidelined because of the complexity of the supply chain, and how different stakeholders working together and using transparency tools. And one such example Lucy provided in terms of the toolkit that the Hidden Home Workers program is developing, which is coming out soon, and how that can be adopted, and how the brand's policies, a transparent, engaging system with their suppliers can go a long way towards us recognizing the rights of the home workers and making the situation of the home workers improved. So what this session has really demonstrated to us all is that it is indeed a very challenging part of the supply chain, looking at informal workers' rights, and they're looking at creating transparency on very complex part of the supply chain, especially in the tier 3, tier 4, or the lowest tier of manufacturing. But what we have also seen that it is with the cooperation of different stakeholders involved, it is very much possible to make a change, to bring transparency, to bring to keep the rights of the home-based workers, the informal workers in place. And that is what the Hidden Home Workers program is trying to do. We have provided some of the contact details of the partner organization of the Hidden Home Workers program. For any questions or any queries, I would like all of you to get in touch with us. We'll be very happy to respond to your queries. So I'll probably stop there. Lakshmi, apologies that we have run over by a few minutes, but I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Rakesh. You brought it together beautifully, and this is an ongoing work. So we invite all of you to be a part of this journey. You have the contact details, stay in touch. Thank you to the UN Human Rights team for this opportunity. Thank you, Harpreet and others, for helping us all come together. Huge thanks to all the panelists and to those of you who have stayed with us, throughout the presentation and asked some really, really important questions. So I will end with the next page in my diary, which has a quote from Helen Keller, where she says, "Alone we can do so little, together we can do so much." So this is the time to come together and hopefully continue to make ripples that have an expansive impact. So thank you once again, and we sign off now. Do stay in touch. Thanks again.